just for those that just joined, I was mentioning that Revv, in partnership with different state body shop associations that we work with, we wanted to do a shared webinar amongst the state association members, opportunity to to share some of the things that we see on the Revv side as far as conversations that we have with our customers and opportunities that present themselves as far as events that we attend and conversations that we have, and some context from some of the partners that we also have as well. So I want to preface this by saying this is not a presentation or demo of the Revv platform. If you're familiar with it, great. If you use it, awesome. If you're not, happy to chat at some point about it. But what we wanted to do is just provide some additional insight into some of the things and changes and a bit of the climate right now, what we're seeing in the ADAS world. So some of this may be knowledge that you're already familiar with. Some of this may be brand new. Some of this may be informational. It may be of good value. It may be something that has been said 1,000 times before, but we want to make sure that we're providing information that's valuable and that you guys can use as far as determining safe repairs, being able to communicate with your partners, whether it's your vehicle owners and or obviously the insurance companies or what have you. And again, we anticipate this being sort of an ongoing thing throughout the next year. So being able to get together and offer sort of a series of webinars with the different associations. So again, I wanted to say thanks for everybody to coming on and joining this morning. We did close off a 2-hour block for this. I would anticipate we'll go through our slides here. I've got about 45 or 50 slides roughly. We won't necessarily go through each one in detail. And then once we're done with that, we've got some time for some Q&A. And with that being said, I wanted to introduce myself. Again, my name is Joel Adcock. I am the Director of Partnerships here at Revv, RevADAS.com. I've been with Revv just under 6 months. Prior to that, I worked for a sublet diagnostic and ADAS vendor here in the Midwest called Precision Diagnostics. Spent about 3 years with them. And then prior to that, I've held different positions and roles with varying companies within the collision space going back to about 2012. So the better part of 12 years that I've been in the industry. When prior to Precision Diagnostics, I worked for a company, and I'll kind of give you a little backstory of my journey into ADAS. So in 2015, I believe it was, I started working for a marketing company out of Arizona that specifically worked with body shops and doing digital marketing, specifically on social media, Google paid ads, websites, obviously. And the term that I kept hearing from some of our body shop customers was, could you guys update our website to include information on ADAS? And at that point, it was a relatively new thing. I think one of the first commercials I'd seen with a vehicle displaying ADAS technology was on the Subarus when they had their blind spots and the little indicator in the side view mirrors popped up when a car was behind the other vehicle, and it got my attention. So as we continue to work with these shops and including information or content around ADAS and started like watching the journey, it made sense that this was going to be sort of the next big thing in this industry. And if you spend any time in this, which I'm guessing a majority of you have, it's at every conference that we go to, it's at every trade show, it's, I think in any publication that you read on a monthly basis, there's at least one article around ADAS, safety, calibrations, do them in-house, sublet to a vendor, send cars to the dealerships, the ongoing conversations that everything that encompasses ADAS, and it's only going to seem to get more and more loud. I'll be curious what your guys' thoughts are as we kind of go through this presentation. But what we've found is that it's not so much that the technology is continuing to prove, it's that there's more technology on the cars that we drive nowadays. And we'll talk a little bit about that. There are some regulatory changes coming down the pike that maybe you've seen or not seen, that by 2029, they're going to be things that are enforced essentially by our government. What does the current ADAS climate and opportunity look like? How many vehicles right now are on the road that have got some sort of ADAS component or safety system installed? What does consumer demand look like? What's their level of appetite when it comes to understanding ADAS? If you talk to Mr. and Mrs. Jones when you're fixing their car, are they talking about making sure that their adaptive cruise works again, or making sure that their blind spot monitors work again after they're done? And then what opportunities exist with collaboration? And I would say this particular forum or platform, if you will, doing this webinar, I'm by no means an ADAS expert, so I want to just make that very clear that I am not an ADAS technician. I've got a little bit of experience in seeing calibrations being performed. I've got a little bit of experience seeing how the inner workings of a sublet company work that provide calibration services. But is there really a good resource right now out there for, let's say, a brand new technician or somebody who wants to get into the industry to go out and learn how to do a diagnostics, or do programming, or do a calibration? Is there need for certification, and what do those collaboration opportunities look like? And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about some of the different safety and opportunities that exist, with a couple of examples of some things that was showed from cars that had a radar that was out of alignment, and then what that potentially looks like as far as how to get those calibrated and things like that. So with that, we've got some more folks that have just joined. So again, appreciate everybody jumping on the call this morning. For those of you that just joined, again, my name is Joel. I'm going to be kind of running us through this presentation here. I've got some slides to show, and then once we wrap this up, as far as the slide deck presentation goes, we'll have some time for Q&A. That being said, if you have a question you want to ask during one of the slides, there is if you look in like your little navigation panel at the bottom of the Google Meet, there's a raise hand. You can click that. Looks just like a hand. Click that, and I'll stop, and feel free to ask your question. Or if you've got something you'd like to ask, feel free to go ahead and blurt it out too. I have no problem with that as far as asking questions as we go along here. So with that being said, let's hop right in here. All right, so we talked a little bit about the topics. I will take just 2 seconds to talk a little bit about who Revv is and what we do. Again, very, very, very minimal. We'll get into some of the regulatory and legal changes, technological advancements and ADAS calibrations, consumer demand, the collaboration, and then we'll get into a few more things prior to the Q&A. So real quick with Revv. Revv is a software platform that was launched back in May of last year. It provides the opportunity for collision repair shops and or sublet vendors to generate a report that identifies ADAS calibrations based on an estimate or repair order. We currently work with roughly 1,500 shops across the country. And then our system does integrate easily with QuickBooks, with CCC through the SecureShare app, and with Mitchell through their EMS dispatch. If anybody has any specific questions afterwards regarding Revv, feel free to reach out. My contact information, I'll throw it in the chat here towards the end. Happy to talk and chat about it at any time. Again, my experience prior to working at Revv, I worked for the sublet vendor here in the Midwest that we exclusively use Revv as a platform to help identify for our customers who are body shops ADAS calibrations in real time based off of their estimates. And real quick, last on Revv, really our mission is to, as it says here, revolutionize road safety by empowering the auto repair industry to put safe cars back on the road. Okay. All right, so let's get in and we'll set the stage as far as ADAS goes. And again, some of this information I'm certain is going to be a bit redundant or familiar with you. Hopefully some of it is new, some of it is intriguing, and some of it does provide some value as far as what the current climate looks like for ADAS and where it looks like going the next couple of years. All right, so what triggers a calibration? Could be several different things, obviously. Could be that we're replacing a windshield. Could be that we're performing a four-wheel alignment and there are some adjustments made. Could be that there are suspension repairs. And then last but not least, but probably most important, that there were calibration repair or collision repairs being completed, which is really broad in the sense of where we're seeing a lot of OE service information now indicating that a calibration is necessary. And I'll give you the example of where we've got a forward-facing camera, but the vehicle is hitting the rear of the car. And I'm sure some of you have heard this, why are we calibrating that forward-facing camera when the car was hitting the back? Well, if we reference OE service information and do our due diligence and do our research, depending on the model and make, it certainly could warrant a required calibration. Does anybody have anything else as far as what may trigger a calibration? And if you're on mute, I would encourage you to unmute and feel free to let me know whatever your thoughts are or comments or questions are on this.
Just one thing real quick.
Yes, sir.
And it's just a thought. So basically, we as repairers shouldn't be making any decisions about recalibrations. It should only be whatever the manufacturer says.
That should be your go-to should be the manufacturer's service information. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. So using that information that they're providing as a guide, looking at the vehicle itself to confirm and identify that the car is actually equipped with that forward-facing radar, obviously completing the calibration at that particular point, and then by virtue of having that access to that information, John, through the service information, supporting that need to do that calibration, that documentation that substantiates it to, in this example, we could say to the insurance company as far as needing to have that calibration completed, and then obviously following through on the reimbursement. It's a great question, though.
Just one follow-up then, because I just had this.
Okay.
On a Honda HRV, had to replace a passenger door mirror that had the camera in it.
Yep.
So $1,200 camera, mirror, $400 calibration. Customer was beside herself that, this has to be done. And, it's just, again, trying to make sure that, in that particular case, there was no choice for the calibration, because as soon as the new mirror went in, it would not work until it actually was calibrated. So right. Yeah. But the rest of the things don't have that, forward facing radars, lane change cameras, we don't know if they're working or not. So it's a lot harder to explain to a customer that has to be done.
Completely agree. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that begs the need for that upfront conversation with your customer, knowing what kind of vehicle they have, being able to identify potentially what ADAS systems are on their car ahead of time so that it's an easier conversation at the beginning versus the end, if that makes any sense. But it's something that, and we'll talk about consumer demand. What is the appetite for consumers as far as understanding and being educated on why a calibration is necessary. But it sounds like, John, you've had some experience with that obviously already. So anybody else? Any questions, thoughts, comments? Again, probably the most significant piece out of this is that collision repairs more than likely are going to be the need for why we're needing to perform a calibration, but there certainly may be other opportunities that come up as far as where a calibration is triggered. And again, we've got those listed out here. So ADAS repairs needed after a collision or vehicle repairs which are mandated by OEMs. Generally speaking, a technician may have to spend considerable amount of time researching those required ADAS calibration procedures, either accessing the OEM service information, or if they've got access to all data or access to repair logic, or using some sort of ADAS scrubber, similar to like there's Revv, there's ADAS Think, there's OneSource, there's some other ones out there as well, which can help minimize some of that research time. But what's interesting is that the data is indicating that roughly for every 10 cars that get delivered back to vehicle owners that need a calibration, 8 of those cars are not getting those calibrations completed. And so it's, the question begs, are we putting people back into vehicles that are safe post repair? And why are we missing those calibrations? Does anybody have any thoughts or comments on this?
Can I just add to that?
Yes.
I think what's really interesting about the collision space versus the service space is collision guys are like surgeons. They get to dig in and see everything and know things differently than your general practitioner. And so not only are those repairs not happening to the cars that have gotten in accidents, but I think there's really a lack of data around how many calibrations are needed as general maintenance. So the number and the business opportunity is enormously more than even just this little snippet.
Completely agree with you. Yeah, I completely agree with you. There's the collision side, yes. And I agree with you, Lyndon, that there's a certain element of expertise that a collision technician has because of the nature of like what they're doing to the car with, disassembling it, being able to identify, behind bumper covers, removing lift, whatever they're doing to the vehicle. They've got certainly a different relationship with the car than where on the other end, maybe call it a generalized mechanical repair shop that's maybe doing some of the same functions as far as taking a bumper off or taking a headlight out. Those particular shops are at a disadvantage right now because they don't even recognize the fact that they're missing potential calibrations. Is that kind of in line with what you're thinking, Lyndon?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in terms of that, like, why is this happening? It just seems like there's a strong lack of understanding. And I think that there's also a strong lack of what's the business opportunity, what is the cost benefit analysis on bringing this sort of stuff in-house and or just making sure it's happening to your vehicle. So this data that you're sharing about how few get calibrated really points to the scope of the problem, but I think that there's so much opportunity for shops that are willing to lean in.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And you've got a select few out there that have leaned in pretty hard to it. They bought their own equipment. They're fully engaged, and kudos to them. They've made the investment. They've made the investment in training and their personnel and staff and equipment. Obviously, that's a big expense. And then you've got, unfortunately, on the other end of it, you've got folks that are even reluctant to do a pre-scan even now because they're concerned about getting reimbursed for it. And that's, quite frankly, that's a shame. Because as we'll see as we get into some of the data here on the amount of ADAS systems that are equipped on vehicles nowadays for the mix of cars that we see coming across our doors, a pre-scan should be second nature. I mean, we should be scanning every car essentially that comes through, that if it's 2013 or newer, maybe you guys have got a little bit different philosophy as far as the age of vehicle and doing a pre-scan, but anyway, we'll get into more of that. But Lyndon, I do appreciate your feedback, and I completely agree with you that there is a huge gap at this particular point. Anybody else with any comments or questions or concerns on this? So ADAS safety system penetration rates for model year 2015 to 2023. Oh, there's Cheryl's question. Real quick, let me see if I can answer this real quick here. So Cheryl's question was, we have many insurance companies denying calibrations as not needed. Has anybody else experienced this? Getting pushback from the insurance companies saying that certain calibrations are not needed, even after providing them with documentation that supports and substantiates the need to do the calibration. Anybody else?
Yes. Even after having it done and giving them the data showing it was done.
Then do they ultimately not pay the invoice, John?
Yep.
Anybody else? Oh, I don't want to speak to any specific insurance companies, and that's perfectly fine. But John, I appreciate the feedback. Do you have any specifics as far as what calibrations were completed and were required on that particular vehicle?
Well, the main one was the front radar on Toyotas versus Hondas.
Okay.
So Toyotas, you take a bumper off, you just disconnected and took off the radar unit. On a Honda, it stays on the car. They both say you should do it, but the Honda one they won't pay for.
So, and again, I've got some experience with this. Several insurance companies, they're trying to really hard to get their arms wrapped around all of this stuff. They're trying to, I don't want to say suppress pricing, but they're trying to understand the pricing models because it's all over the board, right? You call the dealership and it's one price, and you call somebody else that maybe picks up your car and takes your car back to a certified calibration center, and it's a different price and it's substantially more, and there's anywhere in between. So they're trying really hard to get their arms wrapped around this. Obviously there's now a few that have made some relationships with some diagnostic companies, and I won't name any names. I think we're all aware of like what those relationships look like and what the sentiment is, and we don't need to necessarily go down that rabbit hole. But do I think that that's going to continue to happen? I do, unfortunately, and I hope at not the detriment of shops or sublet companies being able to make a be able to turn a profit or generate some revenue that's worthy of the work and expense they've put into their business. Well, Cheryl, I appreciate it. And also, Rob, I know you'd mentioned in the chat, kind of going back to some information on training. There is information on calibration required events through iCar. Looks like there is no cost to that. And Rob mentions that the way they lay it out is excellent, and it's very easy to explain for customers. So, Rob, I appreciate that. So I pulled this particular document just recently. It was in a publication that I saw, produced by a company that does a lot of data research and data aggregation. And what this tells me is that, obviously we know ADAS is here to stay. The technology and the complexity is only getting more diverse. But what this is saying that, and I'll just read it here, as of the 2023 model year, the penetration rates for ADAS safety features range between 22 and 94%, with 10 out of the 14 features surpassing 50% market penetration. These substantial increases reflect the industry's proactive and voluntary commitment to integrating driver assistant technology into vehicles. So what we're looking at here is forward collision warning penetration rate between 2015 to 23 is now up to 94% of vehicles have forward collision warning. 94% have automatic emergency braking, and you can see the rest here. I won't go through all of them, but they're going to continue to increase as we'll look at the next slide here. So specifically looking at forward collision warning and automatic braking, you can see that in 2015, percentage of penetration rate was just under 13% for forward collision warning, and last year it's at 94%. Same thing with automatic emergency braking. 9 years ago it was at 4%, now it's at 94%. You can see the the year-over-year increase on these, just these two specific ADAS systems. Same thing with like lane departure warning, lane keep assist, substantial increases over the last 8-9 years. You can see just even from on lane keep assist, about a 10% increase between 22 and 23. So what does this tell us? That as we all know, the technology is continuing to get more diverse, more complex, but now we're starting to see not just necessarily our higher end vehicles or luxury model vehicles, but on just about every car that's going to come through our shop, 2015 and newer, right? It may very well have some sort of ADAS component and safety system on it. So 2024 calibration volume, I cannot take credit for putting this particular slide together. I did borrow this from somebody, but what it essentially says is that we've got about 100 million ADAS equipped vehicles. If we think about roughly 35% of those vehicles will need some sort of repair over the next year, breaking that down between number of accidents and windshield replacements alone, it's about 13 million each. The overall calibration opportunity of those 26 million incidences is about 4.3 million, which, revenue opportunity aside, is all well and good. But what this tells me is that, I don't know, last time I checked, I don't think there's 3,400 calibration centers across the country. And this is assuming that of those 3,400, that they're doing roughly 5 calibrations per day per location. So if anybody has spent any amount of time or interest in thinking about doing in-house ADAS calibrations, or setting up their own separate company as an LLC, or starting a sublet vendor where your customers are, body shops and even potentially mechanical repair shops, there is almost an unlimited amount of opportunity at this particular point. When I was at my own company, and again, we would work with body shops almost exclusively, and knowing that the amount of cars that needed calibration and what we could provide as a technical resource, or technician resource, I should say, was a little bit limited, because you can only work on so many cars, right, per day. I would tell them, like, look, if we're not available, I hope you can find somebody else that can do the calibrations, whether it's sending the car to the dealership or another sublet vendor, or maybe if it's something where they can do it in-house because it's a dynamic calibration and they've got the bandwidth to do it. There is so much relative opportunity within the ADAS side of the industry. It's pretty crazy. So let's talk a little bit about regulatory and legal changes. Some of the articles that we've pulled here, and I'll just read the headlines. Should advanced driver assistance systems be standard? They're US to require automatic emergency braking on new vehicles in 5 years and set performance standards. I don't know if you guys saw the article a while back that says that by 2029, I believe it is, 2029, the NHT standard on all vehicles by then will have to be equipped with automatic emergency braking. Lane keep assist is mandatory for new cars and vans in the European Union as of 2022. Mandatory installation with regulatory bodies in regions like the EU and US mandating the inclusion of certain ADAS features in new vehicles. So certainly a lot to think about as far as what potential the government entities will continue to play in this environment as it moves forward. My hope is that it's limited, that we're all good enough to be able to identify when a car needs a calibration, and that we're able to complete those calibrations and provide documentation that substantiates the why, and get reimbursed and get paid for the work we're doing. But does anybody have any thoughts or comments or questions on this as far as what they've seen or been privy to or have heard as far as any potential regulatory challenges and changes coming down the pike in the next few years? Rob L just threw a comment in the chat. It says, I know certification for ADAS techs is something that is expected to come. Rob, do you have any specific intel or information as far as like who may be the certification or certifying body on that? If it's easier to unmute yourself, you certainly can do so. Most likely ASE or iCar. Yeah, I would agree with that. All right, and Cheryl's question was, how long before vehicles will self-calibrate? Even if that is the case, we still need to test and or calibrate before releasing to the owner. Does anybody have any information on self-calibrating vehicles they'd like to share?
I would say it's wildly misunderstood. The notion that, because in part, you're not just doing like getting something to look in the right direction. Sometimes you're like with an R&I, but often you're physically redirecting elements, which people really don't understand. So I see that as within our members, one of the biggest issues is there's this assumption that self-calibration is going to fix everything, and it really doesn't.
So Lyndon, you're saying where you R&I a bumper and you've got a module that's behind that bumper cover, that you may need to check some of the vertical and horizontal angles on that particular radar or sensor prior to putting the bumper cover back on, which would mitigate the self-calibrating commentary, correct?
Right. Yes. That no amount of self-calibration is actually going to do that step of it.
Agreed. Cheryl, to your point though, as far as providing a verification or safety test, I do agree. I hope that everybody's doing that now, whether you're doing a dynamic calibration being one thing because you're actually driving the vehicle, right? Doing the relearn. But more importantly, on a static calibration, once that calibration is completed, taking the vehicle out, doing that test drive, verifying that the blind spot indicators do work, verifying that your lane departure warning is activating, whatever you're calibrating, it provides peace of mind back to well, essentially to your customer, right? You can say like, hey, without a shadow of a doubt, we've taken this car out. We had to calibrate the blind spots. We took the car out to make sure they do work. We can safely say that they do work. So again, I don't have any real steadfast opinion on self-calibrating. It is a topic that I do hear periodically. So I can't really provide a substantial opinion on it, but more to the point of, where Cheryl mentions doing the actual doing the test drive after doing the calibration, that is important. And before you release it to the owner, making sure that those ADAS systems do work correctly. And Rob, Rob mentioned here, self-calibration is already happening in Tesla. GM is also self-calibrating 360 camera systems for years now. I have seen that. Most domestic self-calibrate continuously. We found 1 in 10 vehicles pass calibration and fail verification test drive. Interesting. And VW and Audi blind spot lane change assist self-calibrate after program. And Rob, I guess my question there is, are we confusing self-calibrating with a dynamic calibration? I just want to make sure we're clear on that. I assume based on your experience, we probably are okay, but I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. We wait for him to respond. We'll get to the next screen here. All right. So the good part about regulatory and legal is we got only just one slide. We'll move on from that. So, all right. And Brian Gerhardt, thank you. So Brian's comment was, will they remove options to turn on and off features in the future? So Brian, I'm assuming you're saying as far as if I'm the vehicle owner and I'm in my radio head unit and I want to turn my adaptive cruise off or my lane assist, as the vehicle owner, I've got that option and I can turn that off and on now, correct? But your question is, will that optionality be removed at some point in the future? That's a great question. Does anybody have any thoughts or comments on Brian's question as far as whether or not those options can be turned on and off in the future? Personally, I've not heard of anything, but I think that's an interesting question. I could see it from the vehicle owner standpoint that I want control of I like my blind spot indicators, but I don't like my, my forward collision warning, popping up or scaring the crap out of me when it goes off because I'm not paying attention to what's going on in front of me. Or I want to turn my lane keep assist off because I don't like it when it shakes when I cross over one of the painted lines. But on the other end of it, if those systems are fully activated 100% of the time, does that ultimately provide a safer driving environment? I think that begs the question. Is that kind of what your thoughts are, Brian? Joe, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. I would say once it's federally mandated, the answer would probably be no. You can't shut it off.
Do you think that'll happen?
I do. Once it's
Okay.
federally mandated, yes. It's like, can you shut off your backup camera now? No.
You can't, correct.
Yep.
That's a good point. All right, and Jennifer's comment was, not sure if you will touch base on this later, but I was just told yesterday that we are supposed to release a none calibrated car to a customer after a windshield replacement and rely on the customer to have it recalibrated. We are struggling with insurance on this because they don't want to pay sublet prices. That's a phenomenal comment / question, Jennifer. Unfortunately, I don't have any information on that specifically within this presentation. So what you're saying is that it was the customer's responsibility to take the car and get it calibrated somewhere else. And if easier to unmute, you can certainly do so, Jennifer. And kind of referring back to Brian's question regarding the mandatory or requirement to turn on or off features in the future, Rob added that Toyota and Lexus are starting to have all-time collision avoidance that cannot be disabled. That's great to know. Jennifer, Rob gave a response here too in the chat. It said that I found if you provide a document to the insurance showing a calibration is required, they will have to pay it. We run into this daily. And Cheryl also mentioned that this is mostly pushed by glass companies suggesting the owner take the vehicle to a dealer near them. So again, documentation trumps everything as far as being able to get reimbursed. We'll come back to some of these comments here in just a second. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the technology advancements. So we've got different levels of autonomous driving. We've got 0 to 5 based on my estimation and what I've seen and what we see coming down the road for self-driving vehicles at full automation at level 5, and currently where we're at, which is between level 2 and level 3. I think we're starting to get a little bit closer to level 3 with some of the features like you see on Ford with their Blue Cruise or with GM with their Super Cruise functionality. I honestly don't know if we'll ever see fully autonomous vehicles in the next, I've heard by 2030, but I just don't see that happening. I could be wrong. Anybody else have any comments or questions or thoughts on that? What are we seeing as far as some of the advancements? So we're seeing AI and machine learning. We're getting the integration of artificial intelligence to enhance the accuracy and efficiency of ADAS calibrations. It's essentially self-learning, right? It's data that it's using to create an algorithm or additional information that enhances the overall efficiency and safety and accuracy of the ADAS systems. 3D and enhanced calibration technologies. Simultaneous multi-sensor calibrations, essentially, which means you can have the ability to calibrate multiple sensors at one time or simultaneously to save time and ensure accuracy. Has anybody seen this where they're able to do a multi-sensor calibration and improved calibration software? Obviously, as the technology continues to get more sophisticated in our vehicles, software is keeping pace with that. It's really putting a lot of forward momentum on your software providers. I'll just use a couple of examples like CCC and AllData and Repair Logic, continuing to enhance their software features that meet the demands of the collision and ADAS space today. So we've got different categories. I won't go through all of this just in an effort to save a little bit of time as far as the actual subcategories themselves, but we've got sensor data, which looks at the cameras, the radars, the LiDAR, and the ultrasonic sensors. We've got event data. So looking at collision warnings, lane departure alerts, speed alerts, and autonomous braking events. We got vehicle dynamics, which looks at speed, steering inputs, braking, acceleration. And then we've got calibration data. So we've got sensor alignment. We've got diagnostic codes. We've got calibration history. Okay. And then last, we've got behavioral data. So that means the driver themselves, the driver behavior. We've got engagement metrics. We've got environmental data, meaning weather and road conditions. And then we've got post-accident analysis, looking at crash event data and diagnostic reports. And this data is crucial for continuous improvement in vehicle safety, better repair processes, and development of next-gen ADAS systems. Additionally, it supports insurance assessments and regulatory compliance by providing objective data on system performance during incidents. Is it fair to say, I'm reading a book right now, it's called The $0 Car, but is it fair to say that potentially the data that lives within our vehicles is more valuable than the vehicle itself? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Our vehicles are producing a substantial, or newer vehicles, I should say, are providing or producing a substantial amount of data that certain companies are certainly looking to utilize and monetize. Is that fair to say? I saw an article recently that talked about some of the updates and some of the LiDAR technology now, where you can look out into in front of the vehicle up to 1 kilometer, which is, I guess the conversions was at 0.67 of a mile, which is just incredible. So, all right, any thoughts, questions, or comments on some of the ADAS categories? I know we went through those kind of fast, but last, on the technology and data working together, this data is crucial for continuous improvement from vehicle safety. As we mentioned, better repair processes and development of next-gen ADAS systems. By effectively using ADAS safety data, stakeholders across the automotive ecosystem can enhance the vehicle safety, improve those repair accuracies, streamline insurance processes, and contribute to development of smarter, safer, and more reliable vehicles. Easy for me to say. All right, so let's look at consumer demand. I'm going to skip over a couple of slides. Consumer demand, the awareness of safety back in 2021, according to CCC, 84% of drivers believe ADAS features promote safe driving. The regulatory push driving adoption, so we've got lane keep assist and automatic braking, are two examples. I think you could probably throw in the backup cameras as well. And it sounds like there's additional mandates coming down probably sooner than later too. The increase for autonomous demand, the global ADAS systems market is expected to grow from 334 million units in 2024 to 655 million units by 2030. And consumer preferences. So high consumer satisfaction with ADAS features like rear cross traffic warnings, blind spot warnings, and automatic braking are becoming as part of the preferences and what the consumers are looking for when choosing a vehicle. This is just a graph showing what that market looks like over the next roughly 6 years or so. The ADAS feature desirability based on consumer demand. So 82% or almost 83% desire to have blind spot detection, a rear view camera mirror, forward collision warning, and so on. So you can see that consumers certainly have a certain appetite for ADAS functionality and features and systems. And your guys' experience in talking to vehicle owners at some particular point, this is always a question I like to ask. Do they have really any idea of what it takes to complete a calibration to make sure that those safety systems work correctly? I think it's fairly safe to say that they really don't have an understanding of it. And that it's, again, there's desirability there, but then there's understanding too of like, and going back to Lyndon's comment earlier around the gap, specifically on the mechanical side or general automotive side, when we're having a different conversation now with the vehicle owner versus like the insurance company. It's certainly a bit more sensitive, right? Because if you're doing a four-wheel alignment, putting on 4 new tires, you're making some adjustment to thrust angle, and by virtue of doing that, you've got to do a calibration. You know, what does that conversation now look like with somebody that is paying out of pocket for those services? John, you have a question?
Well, more of a statement.
Yes.
I mean, step one, when we get a car in, say you've got a cracked windshield, you look, it's got a camera. If you don't even check the car and drive the car, you don't know that the customer doesn't even use it because it's not turned on.
Right.
Do you still do a calibration, or try and
So your question is, if that's a feature they've got turned off, does it make sense to do the calibration?
Depending on the state you're in, if they resell the vehicle and they don't disclose that a broken never was fixed, they could be gone after as an individual, having nothing to do with the repair shop or otherwise. So I think that's important to raise to the consumer, is that consumers are accountable for putting other consumers behind the wheel of dangerous vehicles, regardless of state inspections.
Yeah.
Depending on the state.
That's great. I mean, that makes sense. It isn't necessarily who owns the vehicle today, but who might own it tomorrow. So just a few more slides and then we'll get into some Q&A here. So roughly 50% of vehicles on the road today are equipped with ADAS, and this number will be about 100% in the next 5 years, as we've seen with some of the regulatory things coming down. Some of this data is a little bit dated, but you can see that, based on this information, as in the little blue box we've got there, there's a substantial amount of tailwinds here if you are in the ADAS services and ADAS part of the industry. All right, so let's talk a little bit about collaboration. Again, I think getting together in an environment like this is a step in the right direction. I think with different programs like ASE and ICAR getting involved and providing, as Rob mentioned, some free training, certainly check that out on ICAR's website. Performance groups. I know there's a few that have been launched or started that provide a forum and a platform for like-minded individuals to get together and talk about different topics that are important to the ADAS industry, specifically education, training, understanding the technology, a diverse set of topics that are really important to us now, and that will create a foundation of like how we continue to evolve as a niche of the collision space, going forward. All right, so I'm going to kind of roll through these last couple of slides here pretty quick. Again, I appreciate your guys' patience. Been some great comments, some great questions in the chat. I apologize if I've skipped over a couple of here, but I wanted to kind of go back to a few that were recently posted. Rob mentioned, as far as the question that I put up was, do consumers understand about ADAS technology and functionality, as far as like how it relates to doing a calibration? His response was, most of our customers don't even understand how to use the systems, let alone what it takes to bring them back online. And Karina's response in that same question, I don't believe the consumer understands, but they will know it's missing when it's not functioning. I completely agree with that. As we all know, there's sensors and modules and cameras and radars really affixed to the vehicle, front, side, back, doors, bumpers, everywhere. I used to take this when I would go out and visit the shops and say, if you've got damage to any one of these areas on the car, figure out where there may be an opportunity that needs a calibration or something along those lines as far as a talk track. And it was just a visual indicator for a service writer or an estimator to put this on their desk and think, all right, I'm looking at this specific car with this specific kind of damage. Am I doing it a full service by really identifying what may have been impacted from an ADAS standpoint? Can anybody tell me the difference between these two emblems, other than that one is flat and one is smooth, or one is raised and one is smooth? Rob L, one is a lens, the other is not. And the one that's flat, so the one on the, I guess as we're looking at it on the left, has the radar behind it. So a good opportunity to try to identify a radar on a vehicle or front radar without taking the grill off or the bumper off is just look at the emblem. If it's smooth, more than likely it's got a radar behind it. If it's raised like the one on the right, then more than likely it doesn't have a radar. Just visual indicators that you guys can use to help maybe be a bit more efficient at times. There is definitely a cost difference too, Rob. Yes. All right. So real quick, I want to kind of roll through this. This is just an example of a data readout on a behind the front bumper on a Toyota, a radar. You can see here the horizontal and vertical alignments were out of spec. Obviously, getting it to 0 degrees is ideal. In this instance, if we've got a horizontal degree of like 1.6 out of spec and vertical 2.8 degrees out of spec, I think we can all surmise that it's looking, doesn't necessarily mean it's looking in the right direction, right? It's not going to provide the best experience for us. So getting it back to 0 is ideal. And what does that 1 degree mean in terms of that deviation and what potentially could happen? If you look at 1 degree off in 60 feet, that's 1 foot of deviation. 1 degree looking down 120 feet is 2 feet of deviation, and down to 180 feet is up to 3 feet of deviation. So at 3 feet of deviation, it could be picking up an object on the side of the road, fire hydrant, construction barrel. Obviously, we want to try to get those degrees right back to 0 as much as possible. So, must I perform a calibration if no DTCs are set? DTC being a diagnostic trouble code. So the analogy or the phrase I've heard several times, and you guys probably have as well, is no lights, no codes, no calibration. As it's been said over and over, that is by far and away not necessarily the case. There are plenty of platforms and aggregators or information that can be used as resources to understand, number one, what a trouble code is, and number two, being able to identify calibrations that may be outside of what we're looking at for trouble codes. Alignments and calibration triggers, we talked about that a little bit already. And then what options and resources are for calibrations? Obviously, there's different sublet vendors and partners out there provide both mobile services and or if they've got a dedicated calibration center. There's certainly the dealer option route, taking the car to the OEM specifically for that dealership. Or you can look at investing in your own equipment and training. There are quite a few different equipment providers now, most of which you probably have seen. I've just got a couple examples here. You've got Autel, you've got John Bean, which is through Snap-on. You've got Bosch, you've got Top Don, you've got Launch. There's Hunter. There's several different options now, from starter kits all the way up to fully integrated kits that will perform not only a calibration, but you can also do an alignment on them as well. So, all right, I'm going to skip over the product stuff from Revv and kind of get into last half of our conversation here as far as the Q&A goes. So again, some great questions, great comments. I really appreciate your guys' input during the slide presentation here. Just kind of going back through some comments here that may have been missed. Rob L says, I explain ADAS components like headlamps. They can be electrically good, but pointed in the sky, which means it's not functioning correctly. If it's electronically good, it won't set DTCs. Completely agree. Brian asks about, will these remain judgment labor times on labor, or will IP step in and preset labor times? And Rob's comment was, we have found cost for calibration varies greatly depending on who you ask. I would, again, agree with that wholeheartedly. And from my experience, again, the term that I've heard over and over again is, pricing it's really the Wild West right now. There is nothing substantial as far as, a blind spot calibration on a Honda being a consistent cost from one vendor or partner to the next. So again, appreciate your guys' comments and questions here. Any other questions not related to the topics that we covered? Again, hopefully this was a little bit helpful. I'm sure a lot of this was information you may all have already been aware of or privy to, but wanted to kind of open the floor here to any questions or comments. Feel free to unmute yourselves and and encourage some open dialogue here. If not, I will gladly share a copy of this presentation with all of the state executive directors that were participating in this. And I'll also send them the recorded link so they can distribute this out to their members as well. Karina, you had a question? Yes.
Hi, this is Karina. I'm with Able to Label. I just wanted to let the individuals know that we offer a low tack vinyl sticker that can be placed on the windshield. We've had a few customers that are interested in this item, helping out with the ADAS type checklist. So I put my email in the chat. It's able, the number 2, and label at outlook.com. If anyone is interested in a sample, I could send an image to them so they could see what I'm talking about and see if it might be useful for their team and technicians.
Awesome. And so that's something that's put on the vehicle. That is it like a QR code, or is it just a checklist?
It's a sticker that's about 4x8, and it has a checklist. It goes through a list of items with calibration to be mindful of, and it offers a check for a yes or no, and what's needed with the repairs that are being done with the car with consideration of the ADAS.
That's awesome.
And we can also, we're flexible. We can adjust it to make it suitable for your team. If there's something that you want to change on there, we can work with that also.
That's a great idea. So that's just like a peel off, peel on, or put on, peel off kind of sticker that's easy to remove, obviously.
Yes, it's a low tack vinyl so that it
Okay.
doesn't have any residue on the window, on the windshield, or the area of the car where it's placed. Again, it's a blue color type label, like a highlight blue.
Yeah.
And it's a 4x8, but we can expand it to be a larger size, a 4x12 or longer if needed. But I don't think that's necessary. But a 4x8 seems to be working with our customers for that.
That's awesome. Could be a great thing to use too. For anybody on here, that if you have customers who are collision repair shops, it could be a good thing to use. Like if you're doing a lot walk, let's say it's a little bit slower day or slower week, and you've got a few, partner shops that you work with doing like a parking lot walk, you could maybe use these stickers to put on there, right? And then obviously you're not getting a full panel of like what needs to be done, but you can at least help maybe guide the estimator or the service writer handling that file for that particular vehicle. Like, hey, maybe we want to take a little bit more of a look at this one. And I put one of these stickers on the car and checked a couple of boxes.
Yes, some of the items that are listed on here are if a calibration is required, yes or no. It gives a couple of lines for what type of calibration is needed, alignment, bumpers. But like I said, it can be altered to match what's needed for the specific location.
Awesome. Very cool. And you said you put your contact information in the chat here?
Yes, I put my email. It's able, ABLE, the number 2, and the word label, LABEL, at outlook.com.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karina. Appreciate it. Brian's question is, will ADAS require maintenance over time? So Brian, if I think about your question, are you saying, I'll give you an example, maybe thinking of an analogy of like here in the Midwest, we've got potholes.
Exactly, potholes, people driving crazy, just ditch right, you name it, and nothing's going to red flag it.
So do we have anybody from California here? I know Ryan McClune's on. Ryan works with the state association out there. I used to live in California, and similar to this, Brian, I think where you're kind of going is like you had to pass a state emissions test before you could register your car. And I almost wonder if it's going to be where you have to do something similar before you can register your vehicle. And I'm thinking very, very high level, and I'm, brainstorming at this point. Is that kind of where you're thinking this goes? Or are you thinking more of just standard maintenance? Like, hey, I'm getting an oil change.
Yeah,
do a
standard
check. And, oh, by the
safety.
way, can you guys calibrate
Yeah.
my camera real quick?
Yeah, just so over time, vehicle gets 100,000 miles to 100, or if it goes to be sold, you'd almost think there'd have to be a maintenance on it, like a checkup, just like a wheel alignment or something else. Your wheel alignment goes out, hitting potholes and stuff over time. You think, some of these cars, these cameras are going to be bouncing around, and you think there'd be a maintenance, like once a year maintenance or 100,000 miles or something.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know of it. Obviously, I don't think it's something that exists to this, at this point, but I certainly think at some point it certainly can. Anybody else with any thoughts or comments on that? I think it's a great question. I mean, as a consumer, wouldn't it make sense?
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even if you're going to sell the car,
Right. Yeah.
to have that all just checked, everything checked out.
Yep.
And a moneymaker. You think it'd be an opportunity for, a standalone business, actually.
Yeah, if you were thinking of that a little bit further down, I mean, if you were like, let's say, an auction service, right, and you're providing a service where dealers are buying vehicles, they're trying to get cars that are safe, right, or whatever you want to call it. Wouldn't it make sense that they can say, we've done a panel checklist on all the different safety systems and everything's calibrated and working correctly, and here's some documentation to say that we did it, and some pictures and whatever else. It seems like there's certainly a huge possibility for that. Lyndon, did you have a comment or question on that? I saw you unmuted.
I think that's definitely something that is going to be coming down the line, particularly when you see things like shops getting the hunter alignment racks and all of that. But I think the thing that's missed very often with the EPA comparison is that there is data. And as an industry, we have a real lack of data right now in terms of being able to substantiate why we would actually need to be verifying calibrations. Yeah. So, and there are some states like the state of Minnesota, we have the raw data that could be interpreted, but actually trying to get that done and work with the state on that is a big project.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think looking at, again, kind of going back to some of those slides we showed with some of that, not only the ADAS data, but just the penetration data as far as number of vehicles that are going to have an ADAS system. And, that data may not necessarily be valuable at this particular time, similar to EPA, but I think at some point it certainly might be. Real quick, Brian, Rob's response regarding requirement for maintenance for ADAS. Rob mentions that ADAS should not require maintenance. You should only have to work on them if there's a failure or outside force like a collision or windshield replacement. Appreciate it, Rob. Any other questions, topics, comments? If not, you guys can certainly go back to your days. I certainly appreciate it. And like I said, I'll send out some follow-up to the state EDs with copy of this particular slide deck, and then a copy of the link as well to the recording here for this webinar. Thank you, Lorenzo. Appreciate it. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.